In today's video, I want to share ideas with you for creating crazy quilt designs that use embellishments and hand embroidery. Hi, I'm Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts. Today, we're taking a look at Beyond Crazy Quilts, Piecing, Patchwork, and Embroidery for Unique Designs. It's by Christen and it's from C&T Publishing. So a big thank you to C&T Publishing for sending me this book so I could share it with you. And Salem, apparently. So let's first read what she has to say. Throughout the book, we'll see that there are these little CB, Christen Brown, little notes. So it says here, Beyond Crazy Quilts is indeed a bold statement. For this book, I have created examples that share my own unique ideas that combine a variety of techniques and embroidery and embellishment stitches. I hope that the projects and gallery examples help you to create your own designs. Please note that I have done my best to provide accurate measurements and guidelines. So this is a book that's going to inspire you to come up with your own designs with some information, obviously, from Christen to create crazy patch designs, projects, and you can use them for lots of different things. It doesn't have to be a quilt necessarily, but in here you'll see they're mostly table runners, mini quilts, those types of projects, but you're using embroidery stitches, you're using different kinds of embellishments, and there's just a chock ton. A chock ton, is that a word? It's chock full. There's a ton of information. It's chock full of great ideas. Okay, so let's go to the front. So what I like about this book is that in the front she shows you the different projects that she's going to help you create with your own ideas, but with some guidance from her. And then there's also what she calls a visual guide, okay, or you might call it an index. So it's the different stitches, because she's going to show you how to do different stitches in the book. So she has this guide up front. It shows you the type of stitch, what it's called, and also what page the information on how to do that stitch is on. So for example, here's a chain stitch. It's on page 52. So I like this because you can go right away to the front of the book. You can see all these different stitches and other, I'm going to get to some more embellishment ideas in a second, but you know exactly where they are in the book. Okay, so if I'm looking for a feather stitch, I can see a feather stitch. It's on page 62. I can go to page 62 and learn how to make it. So I find this really helpful in the front of the book because there are a ton of stitches in this book. So it could get confusing if you're just trying to flip through and find it. Then she also has these what she calls filler shapes. These are so cute. These are little, well, there's different ones, but what I see here mostly is kind of bug-related things, okay? So there's a little spider stitch. There's a button spider stitch. There's a butterfly stitch. So, you know, you get the idea. Then she also shows different ways to embellish buttons, which I thought was really interesting too. Simple idea, very effective results. She talks about the different materials that she uses when she's creating these projects. Always helpful to know what someone is using and the products that they find work the best. Then she gets into this section, which talks about the base you're going to be creating with fabric before you start doing all the embellishments. And she talks about whether you want to have it strip piece, like a strip piece block, a wedge pieced block, or what we call a crazy pieced block, which starts with typically a hexagon or triangle in the center and builds out from there. So she explains those different ideas that you can use to start your blocks off to create that base. She also goes into some of the different embellishments that she is using. So we've got different prairie points here. We've got the regular prairie point. We have a line prairie point. You can see there's a couple of different fabrics in there. Mock prairie points. And even the yo-yos. One of the things I thought was interesting here, we've got fabric circles and yo-yos, but you can see she has what she calls a crazy pieced base. Okay, so typically we think of a yo-yo as one piece of fabric, you make the yo-yo with it. But hey, why not have different fabrics in that base and then create your yo-yo or your circle? Okay, so that is kind of an interesting idea as well. Gives a little bit more interest to your project when you put them in. Then she talks about making the base from start to finish, all right? So we've got a 3-patch block, a 4-patch block, what she calls crazed crumbles block pattern, and a 9-patch diagram using the wedged crumbles block pattern. So there's different ideas here again, and these block patterns are at the back of the book. Again, she tells you what page they are on, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. So we're starting off with that. And then, of course, once you've got your base made, you come to the really fun part, which is all the embellishments. Okay, now you may look at some of these, this one for example, primarily crazy for Kevin, and go, oh my gosh, that's too much for me. Well, it might be, or you might absolutely love it. But the idea of this book is that you can take some of the stitches, some of the button embellishments, the other ones we looked at with the yo-yos and circles and that type of thing, and you can add as many or as few as you want to your project, okay? So you look at this as an inspiration book. There are projects in it, but again, you add as much or as little as you want to create something that is your aesthetic. Once we get past a sample here, I should say, we're into the thread and bead embroideries. We actually are getting into some stitches here. And what's interesting is she shows you the difference, because you can do, not always, but a lot of the times you can do the same, create the same look with beads as you do with stitching, as you can see here. So you can see how we've got this, it's a simple cross stitch, where you've got it stitched out with just your thread. And here you can see where you've done it with beading. So there's a different look to it. I mean, it's the same stitch, but it looks a bit different with the beads, right? You can even combine stitches with beading, which she shows you in the book as well. But I mentioned we were getting into the stitches, so here are some of them. Remember I mentioned the chain stitch earlier? So here's how to make the chain stitch. So she tells you, she's got little diagrams. She also tells you in text how you create these stitches. So it's a good reference book for how to create stitches, as well as an inspiration book for your own projects. We also have ones that are showing how to add, or how to use, I should say, beads instead of just the stitches, right? So this continues on for quite a few pages, because as I mentioned, there's lots and lots of stitches in this book. But you can see all the examples here, very easy to follow along to create these yourself. She also has information on creating stitches with ribbon, okay, so ribbon work. Very interesting, very effective as well. Something I haven't stepped into yet, but one day I'm sure I will. And then you can see all the different beading ones as well as you go along here. Lots and lots and lots of ideas. Then we get into some of these, which are a little more intricate. Some of these are very interesting. Snap and hook decorations. Okay, who would think you're not actually using these as snap and hook, you're using them as a decorative element on your project. So I thought that was really fun. So we've got some beads to add interest to those. They're basically the base, and then you're adding the beads to them. We also have these different little flower designs. Again, we've got ribbon, we've got just stitched, and we've got beads on there too. And remember I mentioned some of those little bugs up front? Yes. Look at how cute these are. Here we are with these little snaps again, hooks and eyes, you know, different kinds of fastening. Look, a little pin here. Those are the base, and then you just add to them and you make these cute little bugs, right? I also mentioned buttons, different ways of doing buttons. Here's a really good example of different ideas you can do with adding thread to a button in different ways, and it creates something that looks really, really interesting, right? Isn't this gorgeous? We have some beads around the bottom here of this one, but even here where you just have different stitches, this is like a single lazy daisy stitch, or a chain stitch if you will, and then just going out and going around the button with your thread creates a really interesting look, something very different. And here's a few more as well with different stitches. So you'll learn the embroidery stitch and then get out your buttons and go to town, right? Okay, then we get into some more detail here. So here she's going to talk about different concepts on the different block patterns. So we mentioned the strip pieced block initially. Here's some ideas of what you can do with it, and it continues on. So as I mentioned, you can do something very simple. You can just keep adding to it and keep adding to it, and you know, create something that's very intricate, or keep it very simple. And then there are projects in the back. So this is the strip pieced block wall hanging. She goes into great detail to show you what fabric she's using. Okay, different trims she's using, even the pearl cotton or silk ribbon in this case, the fabric circles, rosettes, appliques, little embellishments that she's using to create this design here. And then she goes into detail on how to do that. So you could just follow right along and create your own spin on that particular project. Here's one with this crazy piece block. Remember I said it has this probably not a hexagon, pentagon, 5-sided. Sorry, I'm not good at those shapes. In the center, but you can see we've got lots of stitching here. We've got buttons, we've got yo-yos, we've got other little purchased embellishments. And again, she shows you them all here that she's using. So it gives you a really good idea of what's in there, because when you look at the project in its entirety, it's sometimes difficult to tell exactly what she used there, what went on there, right? When there's a lot on them. This wasn't too bad, but if you look at all the different colors, she used a pearl cotton or pearl floss. I don't know that I would have picked that up by looking at this, but now I'll take a closer look and see where I can find those. It's like a puzzle. Where is that piece in there? Or where's Waldo? Where's the embroidery floss, right? This is another one, Strip Crumbles Block Table Covering. Very pretty. And you can see again, I love how she shows you the fabric she uses, right? And that's something that's interesting too, is to take a look at the fabric she's combining, not just the colors, but the scale. So you've got, you know, a solid, tone on tone, big scale, smaller scale. She's mixing things up, and that's part of what makes these projects work too. And the Wedged Crumbles Block Wall Hanging. Look at the gorgeous beads and pearls we're using. Pearls we're using in there, right? And the fabric she's using, all low volume, but there's just a little bit of a difference between them, right? To give a little bit of contrast there. Very pretty. Another Crazed Crumbles Block Wall Hanging. These are all set on point. And again, look at the fabrics. Now these fabrics, if you can tell by looking at them too, these are not quilting cottons. These are more like upholstery fabric, home decor fabric that she's using in this particular one. So the nice thing about when you're doing these crazy quilt ones is you don't have to be limited to just quilting cotton, right? It's your chance to play with all different kinds of fabric. Look at all the different beads she's got in here. Gorgeous. And remember, I said that the block patterns are at the back of the book. Here they are here. They're 6-inch finished blocks. And so you've got the strip piece, the wedge piece block, the crazy piece block. Here's her stripped crumbles block. So all the different ones are in the back of the book that she mentions in the front as the foundations or the base she's using for all of those different projects. So if you are wanting to get into the crazy quilt craze and you're looking for a book that provides you with inspiration, that gives you information on how to do different stitches, how to use beading, how to use embellishments, you've got to get this book called Beyond Crazy Quilts, Piecing, Patchwork, and Embroidery for Unique Designs by Christen Brown. I've got a link up above or in the description below for you to get your own copy of the book. Now, if you're wondering what else you can do with embroidery stitches, don't worry, I've got you covered. Check out this video, which has all the information that you need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.